Welcome to the Ultimate Music Teacher's Productivity and Profitability Podcast. I'm your host, Glory St. Germain. Tune in to discover how you can unleash your teaching potential and turn your passion for music education into profit. Let's dive in. Have you ever wondered what happens when the structured world of the classical music meets the spontaneous spirit of jazz improvisation? Well, today's episode promises to unravel this intriguing fusion. Welcome to the Ultimate Music Teacher's Productivity and Profitability Podcast. I'm your host, Glory St. Germain, and today we have the incredible opportunity to delve into the world of jazz and improvisation with our very special guest, Bradley Sowash. Bradley is not just a jazz pianist and multi-instrumentalist, but also he's an educator who is passionate about introducing traditionally trained pianists, such as myself, to the joys of jazz and pop improvisation. Now, Bradley's journey has taken him from a performing and recording artist to a mentor guiding others through live online classes and publications. And when he's not creating musical magic, you might find him on a tractor or horseback somewhere exploring the foothills on his family farm in southern Ohio. So let's dive in and discover the rhythms and harmonies that make Bradley's world so unique. Welcome, Bradley. I'm so excited you're here.
Thank you, Gloria. It's lovely to see you again, and I appreciate you tapping me for hopefully some wisdom I can share.
Oh, absolutely. I just can't wait. So, Bradley, just to kick things off, could you share what sort of ignites your passion for helping us recovering classical pianists embrace the music? It's, in our hearts, of course. So what's the story behind this unique focus for you?
I guess in a nutshell, it's just so much fun to be a generative music maker, to play off page or to augment the page. So just last night, just taking a slice of life, I was at the Irish session here in Athens, Ohio, playing bass and Celtic banjo with some terrific musicians, all by ear. And, they're just calling out the tunes, many of which I'd never heard before. This is in B minor, and it goes major on the bridge, they might yell. And then here we go. And you're making up your bass line and so on. And that is just so much fun. Or another way to look at it is in a few weeks, I'll be doing probably my 50-something Christmas sing-along for our family get-togethers that my mom did this and maybe someone before her and passed it along. And, it's raucous. It's everybody sort of showing off. There's a little bit of booze involved and it loosens up the vocal cords. And we sing some songs and have a great time and have the memories and the videos come out and all that. And that kind of just, not jazz club, not concert, not highly polished, just having a grand old time with music was my original exposure to music, doing family jam sessions. And as I became more and more trained, I noticed that there was more and more, severity or a pursuit of perfection that seemed to pull the spirit of music out of the most trained musicians. And so seeing that, I just made it a quest to do everything I could to show some people the doors that may have been remained closed for them towards musical creativity. And over the years, beyond my expectations, I've actually had impact and influence, and I think it's making a difference. My vision for the future of musical education is simple, that all pianists would be able to read music and wing it equally well and just see them all as one big way to play the piano.
Yeah. Oh, it's so much fun, and just watching you, and like you said, music, it's, it creates this atmosphere. It's about the fun. Sometimes we think it's all about technical aspects, but really it's about just embracing the moment. And in the dynamic world of music education, what impacts are you observing with the abundance of jazz knowledge on platforms now like YouTube? And how do you think this affects learning and the development of musicians?
Well, first of all, let's talk about the good. The technology has been wonderful for all of us who are willing to open up our learning curve and learn new skills. And so, for example, I've been teaching live online jazz piano classes for 7 years. Note that starts before the pandemic. So I was able to reach people outside of my community because let's face it, the number of students studying jazz are a lot smaller than traditional pianists, though I'm hoping to change that. And so it gave me a wider reach, and it gave me a skill set that got me through the pandemic. And it's just been wonderful as the video conferencing we're participating in right now has become more and more capable. That's been wonderful. And another aspect of that has been, the availability of information. It's so easy to share, a handout or a video you make, augment the teaching with all kinds of resources or daily feedback. Just as a quick aside, my students share, like many teachers, practice videos, and they get that individual feedback that is formerly impossible. So those have been just wonderful. And I would even add to that, it's easier than ever to publish with the trend of downloadable PDFs. You can put something out without the long process of moving it through a publisher and getting into their queue and all that. And you make those quick adjustments when someone points out an error, or you have a change of heart, or you find some way to improve the cover or whatever. So those have all been pluses. And the negatives are not all that negative, but a few trends I've noticed, I had just named two, is that YouTube has created a certain kind of learner that has a lot of knowledge, not much ability to apply it. So I might bring up an idea like block chords. Here's a sound of block chords on a Gershwin tune. Block chords is a different meaning in the jazz world than block chords in music education. It's a specific way to voice your chords. So for example, and I might present that and I'll hear, I already know all about block chords. And then let's play a major scale in E flat. Showing me how you do that. Well, maybe not, you see. So the head gets ahead of the fingers. And so how are teachers to teach in an environment where, in a sense, all knowledge, or at least all jazz knowledge, can be accessed somewhere on YouTube and through tutorials and so on? The problem with that, of course, is that it's not sequenced. It's not catered to the students where they are just then. And
Right.
frankly, a lot of it is sort of tip of the iceberg that the presenters, myself included in my improv tips of the month, they are kind of light. They're just a sort of dash through an idea, because otherwise it would take hundreds of hours, right, to lay out all the knowledge. So I find that students come in needing less pure knowledge and more acting as a funnel, where I need to help them be accountable. All right, you know how to play block chords on the first three notes of a scale on other scales. For next week, let's do it in these three keys, giving them that specific accountability and practice schedule that makes them actually assimilate it and have a transferable musical concept. The other piece of that is missing on YouTube, despite the ability to comment and have all these social media structures around it, is just pure community. I had a student yesterday say how much she appreciates the community that's developed around my teaching, and that's a total side effect. I never saw that, but now I have students who I would definitely go visit the next time I'm in their region, or do go visit. And, we've become friends. And so that's, the difference between watching a tutorial that's specially recorded and kind of condensed information to actually interacting with a living person and with a skilled teacher who knows how to hit the right challenge at the right time. So that's one of two. The other one I would throw out, if I may, is the access of recorded music. Recorded music for me is a love-hate situation, because wouldn't we all love to live as performers in a time when music was just incredibly rare and wonderful? I'm thinking about the scene in Outlander where a Scottish harpist comes to the castle and they all gather in hushed tones for this great evening where we're going to hear music. Now it's just a constant soundscape. And as a younger player, I would save up my money and go to a record store, and I could only afford to buy 2 or 3 records. And so I would listen to them really carefully over and over and over until they were all scratchy, copying licks I liked, trying to grab concepts, if not specific notes, that I could apply to my own playing, and really living in that album for a couple of weeks, or in some cases still to today, some of the classics. And when you contrast that with students coming up today, there's just music everywhere, and that it becomes a kind of a wash. It almost, in a sad way, becomes background music. So I just have this sense that the invention of the microphone and recorded technology has been, in a way, good for music listeners, and in a way, not so good for musicians. Pop stars aside, I'm talking about musicians, people that down in the trenches that know the craft of their instrument. So it's not about fancy light shows or huge Ticketmaster sales. I'm talking about the actual players who are musicians as opposed to entertainers. I think that it has hurt us as performers a little bit, and it has, as I mentioned, given students too wide of access. So it's wide but not deep. So those are things we're pushing against as educators, and they're easily surmountable. It's easy enough to just say, I want you to listen to this recording 5 times this week, and I want you to comment specifically on what you heard, as opposed to, I liked it.
Yeah.
What is happening? What's that musician doing? So by making it an assignment, it makes it deeper. But I just think that's some of the challenges, and really they're minor and surmountable. They figure into the formula of teaching in today's environment.
Yeah, so much so, Bradley. And I love what you said about, building that community. And I think one of the things that's important too is that, yes, we have YouTube channels. We've all scoped and learned things on YouTube, but it's important to have balance between that and then connecting with a music teacher such as yourself. And certainly I know from our ultimate music teachers in our community too, it's about that collaboration. And, kind of speaking of collaboration, we all have one person who's being pivotal in influencing our lives. Could you tell us about maybe who's played a role in your musical journey? Maybe share a story from those early days?
Well, yeah, so I could go a long way on this, but I'll condense it to saying my family was the biggest influence on my musicianship. And we had jam sessions regularly. My mother met my father by playing in a local big band setting where dad played trumpet and mom was the singer, and also her brother was the band leader. And so she played piano in a sort of a boom chick way. Oh, when the saints, that kind of stuff. And we just had a bunch of instruments laying around. And so the point is that music wasn't special. I didn't know that it wasn't just normal for all families to just goof around. It didn't probably always sound good. But from there, my older brother, who is 10 years my elder, went and became very serious about being a composer, which he does to this day. He's in his 70s. And I think he's the most played living classical composer in terms of radio airplay anywhere, because he's still putting it out and his music's very enjoyable and accessible. He made me his project when he was a freshman at Indiana University. So I was an 8-year-old boy. He came home and said, he's a little bit nerdy and didn't have a lot of friends, or they'd gone off to other places. And I think part of it was just we were buddies. And he decided he would teach me freshman music theory and get me composing. I still have my notebooks, pencil and paper, and where I notated my first pieces. And I really learned a lot about chords and harmony and musical structure. It kind of proves that you don't necessarily have to underestimate a younger student, because that just set a foundation that has served me my whole career, from tutoring fellow students while I was in music school. I actually traded music theory study for students that were helping me with my terrible math skills. I know those should go together, but I need, and so we'd work together and help each other, and just tweaking other trained musicians to this day. A lot of what I'm teaching in a jazz setting is more understanding of chords and voicings than just being able to construct them, for example. So I would say my older brother was a huge influence as part of my family. I need to mention my in-between brother, because he was playing in bands, and these were easy listening bands. His name of his band was Live in the Blues, and they played, little country clubs and VFW meetings and everything. So it wasn't raucous, it was gentle. And then when he moved on to college, I was old enough to do that. So we renamed the band Reliving the Blues and kept it going. So just playing those gigs, seeing what people like. The one kind of older brother serving the cerebral side of learning how music works, and the other brother serving let's call it the practical or the hard side a little bit, like by just showing me that you can go out and play and it's not that big a deal. And then after that, just all the music on our hi-fi that we were always listening in that deeper way I mentioned before, to not always great albums, but whatever. I probably know every note of the Whipped Cream Tijuana Brass record, because that was one of the 12 that were in the bin. So yeah, so I would say my family was my biggest influences. And then I can go on. I guess I'll just mention, I wrote a letter to Aaron Copland when I was in high school, basically saying I wanted to be him. I thought there was a job category of American composer. I didn't realize that probably only a handful of maybe him and Leonard Bernstein, Gershwin, were going to fill that job role. He was nice enough to write back. That small little hand-typed letter sits in a beautiful frame on my wall today. And, you just never know where your mentor is going to come from. As you said, that was a big thrill to me and a shot in the arm that moved me forward. Even though my music is not very Copland-esque, it was wonderful to connect with a brilliant star in American musical landscape and actually get a personal note from him. So I would have to include him on that incident as an important mentor.
And, you've really been so blessed, Bradley, in sharing your journey and family. And sometimes, what we think is like so unique is so almost assumed, with your family being so musical. I grew up in a musical family as well. So for us, the music was always part of every celebration. It was kind of like brushing your teeth. You played an instrument, pick one, pick more than one to, do this. I know my dad used to say, it doesn't matter if you play a wrong note now and then, but always stay in time. Like just keep it, don't lose the tempo there. So how do you approach the challenge of teaching improvisation to pianists who have been traditionally, bound to sheet music? Like, are there any particular techniques or mindsets that you encourage?
It would take a while to lay out my technique, but one of the hearts of my teaching process is an exercise called scaling the chords. So probably is not the right format to lay out the steps, but it involves playing scales first linearly like we normally learn them on any instrument, and then beginning to randomize the scales in guided ways. So we could change direction, or we could add longer notes, or we could add some leaps so they aren't all adjacent notes. And then underneath that, we are playing, depending on the level, a simpler to more complex chord progression in the left hand. And then eventually moving that through the keys, and then eventually moving that through less, I don't want to say exotic, what's the right word? Less traditional scales, such as blues scales or altered scale, harmonic minor as a sound, these kinds of things. So one of my tenets that comes out of that is that students who study creative music making, and I do like that word better than jazz, just as an example, we are in an arranging course just coming to the end of it right now. I don't think any of the students have chosen a jazz style for their arrangement. We're arranging Christmas tunes, each with their own take on it. So it's more, jazz is certainly an important improvisation and creative music making style, but it's not exclusive to jazz, these skills I'm talking about. And so, to having described a little bit of the detail of scaling the chords, the purpose of that exercise is a broader philosophy, which is to separate transferable creative concepts from repertory. Yeah. So if you learn a tune, that's great, and you can play that tune. What's more important to me is in the process of learning that tune, what takeaways can you now add to your toolbox that you will pull out again later, like a cool lick or a pattern or a new voicing or a little time feel thing or a better grasp of swing, so that ultimately the repertory is much secondary to that functional toolbox of skills that can be pulled out and used again and again. And this is the part that people, especially listeners, miss, not realizing that those are learnable and attainable skills. So they chalk it off to talent. Oh, you're so talented. Yeah. But there's a lot of, you could list what I did here. This sound I learned from this jazz teacher. This I read about in a book. This I borrowed from a transcription. Yeah, so it comes down to repertory and transferable skills. That's how I get at it.
Yeah. And it's really powerful because, what you just said, Bradley, which is when people say, oh, you're so talented, you just almost want to reply and say, well, it's a learned, you put in your 10,000 hours, as they say, like it's not that you're so talented, it's that you've really worked at your craft. And that's how you get to be there. And I know for you, Bradley, you're an incredible multi-instrumentalist, and maybe share how, has playing different instruments influenced your approach to jazz and improvisation.
Yeah, let me just add to that 10,000 hours. 10,000 hours is a waste of 10,000 hours unless you know what you're working on.
True.
I could play for at least for 10,000 hours and not do anything else. You have to have,
Yeah,
have that, know where to focus your learning.
very
Yeah,
true.
thank you. I do play, the way I describe my multi-instrumentalism, well, that's a mouthful. Um, I'm a concert pianist who also plays gigs, but I've got my piano playing to a level where I was able to take bows and sell tickets. I'm a gig level bassist and drummer. And then I'm hesitating here because I would say I'm a hobby level mandolin, or it's Celtic banjo. It's a 4-string banjo. They're very similar instruments, except I'm starting to get gigs on those. So string instruments have come along, and then guitar and Irish whistle and hand percussion. And I mean, there's more instruments in this room I'm sitting in than a music store. It's just like a big playroom. So, yeah, how has it influenced my playing? We do a family concert here twice a year on the solstice and the equinox. And we have, so my daughters are singing and my brother are singers and play instruments. My brother's a piano player, who I mentioned earlier, my middle brother. And it's fun. People come out, we do a potluck, we have lots of people here and so on. And my brother, who has known me my whole life, noticed there's a tune where I played piano and he didn't. And so I had to play bass and piano with that split sound.
Yeah.
And he said, your bass on your left hand of your piano sounds like a bass player more than ever. The licks you're playing, the lines you're playing. He said, do you think that playing bass as a bass has changed your
Right.
your concept of, that was an interesting observation. I thought, yeah, it really has. And interestingly, the other thing, just a technical thing, I'm a right-handed player. That's my dominant hand. Playing string instruments has really improved my left-hand piano playing. I wouldn't have seen that coming, but moving around all those frets has strengthened my fingers and got more individual control. So I feel like my hands are pretty close to equal because of the string work, not so much the piano work. So it's just a little side benefit of playing all those instruments. And I just throw in this, and the ear, working out an Irish whistle, how to play a tune you just heard. That is not so much a different instrument approach, but using those instruments in different settings has definitely expanded my ability to play by ear. And it's given me respect for learners, because it's hard to go from having signed autographs after a show to sounding pretty average on a new instrument. So it reminds us, just like I know you're a lifelong learner, it reminds us about what it feels like to be on that learning journey.
Oh, always learning, always learning. And, it's so interesting that you have so many instruments. And in fact, instead of calling it your music room, you just call it the playroom. So in order for you to be playing all of those instruments, and obviously, you dedicate a lot of time to that, but let's talk about your life off stage. So how does living on a farm in the foothills intersect with your musical career? How do you, find any parallels between farming and music making? It's quite interesting.
Thank you. Well, part of it, just as an aside, one of the inspirations for that is I learned a long time ago that Dave Brubeck was a ranch wrangler as a boy. I thought that was cool that you could do both. I want to be clear, I'm not a sole proprietor farmer. I live within a quarter mile of my 2 daughters and their husbands. So we have almost a family compound here. And my aforementioned brother lives about a mile away. So the farm duties are definitely spread out among a lot of people. And so for me, at this point, I am the sort of helpful patriarch who knows how to fix things and the landowner. But I have my tasks given to me by my daughters regularly. So a typical day for me starts with letting the chickens out and watering the horses, making sure all the animals are secure. And that doesn't take long. And then I get into the studio and teach or do the daily business of being a musician that we all know about, the business side or marketing and so on, and working on publications, working on lesson plans, all of that. And then I try to wrap it up by about 2:00 and then get out there onto the tractor and do what needs doing, whether it's mowing a new pasture or moving cattle, which we move every day. So it's a full farm. We have pretty big herd of cattle, hogs, chickens, 3 horses, more dogs than I can count. And just recently there's a new barn cat who's really sweet. So I love it. It's good for my health to be out there in the sunlight, moving my body. It makes a nice contrast to the more detailed work that I do in the studio. They do conflict with each other sometimes. Like I have to, it could be that during this podcast, my son-in-law rolls by in his tractor and I need to say, shut things like that. But I love it.
Yeah. It's so much fun. We live in the city now, but we used to have we only had 5 acres, but we had the Hop Inn, which was full of rabbits. And then those rabbits made more little bunny rabbits. And we had 3 horses as well, and cats that just kept multiplying because they were all barn cats and dogs. And so, it was really refreshing just to kind of step out between, teaching and getting some fresh air. And I'm curious, Bradley, if you had to compose a jazz piece inspired by a day on the farm, what would it sound like? Can you paint us a picture with a few words?
Maybe with a few notes. I think it
Okay.
would start sunrise. I'm going to just play some G major cluster here. That comes to mind. This is not written, so. Just that breaking dawn. And as the sun comes up, I'm getting more and more into things. So I'm going lower on the piano. It's not really defined yet. And then it would start to fall into the rhythm. I don't know, that's G, I'll go to C. And the day starts to build. So I'm thinking it needs a non-diatonic chord. I'll throw an F. And then the coffee takes effect, and it starts to build because I'm a very energetic person. Wind that down probably as this time of year. We're doing this in December. It gets dark here about 4:45. So that would wind down pretty fast as I race to do the latter part of the day chores and close all the doors and do the animal things again. So
bravo. Applause, applause, applause. My favorite part was when the coffee was kicking in.
Yeah.
I could just listen to you play all day. It's just, I love listening to music. And, it's an interesting thing when we're listening, because when I listen to music, whether it's in a club or it's in a formal concert, it doesn't matter where I am. When I listen to music, I want people not to talk to me because I get so into the music that I'm not there. And one thing you talked about, Bradley, and it's about, are you there listening to the music or is it just in the background and you're actually not paying attention? And I love listening. Like, I just love the focus and it takes me to that place. And so thanks for your improv concert here on the farming.
Let me just add to that. I feel like the media reinforces, actually subconsciously or unconsciously teaches us not to listen.
Yeah.
Because of the word background music.
Yeah.
Every commercial has that underneath. I'm straining to hear through the words to get to the music underneath.
Yes.
I always thought it would be funny to make like a musician's cartoon about how a musician hears an ad with teeny little font with the words and great big music. Whenever there's background music, it says this isn't important. It's just supporting.
Yes.
But musicians don't approach listening that way. To me,
no.
The music is the point. So
it's so funny you said that, Bradley, because I'm exactly like that. And sometimes there's a commercial on and I love the music. And after the commercial's over, because whoever was the composer of that little jingle was so good, and I'll look at my husband, I'll say, I don't even know what that ad was about, but I really like the music.
Yeah, and also interludes. They play on the radio, they play just a couple seconds of great music. It goes by, I'm really starting to dig into it, and the news comes back on. I don't know who that was or what it was about. There's no personnel cited. Same thing. It just goes by too fast, and it was a good little moment, and somebody deserves credit for that.
Well, it's funny because the music that you hear at the beginning and the end of the Ultimate Music Teachers podcast was composed by my daughter, Sherry St. Germain. She is a music producer in Las Vegas. And I said to her, okay, I need, music for my podcast. And I obviously am choosing you to be the composer. And so she sent me the music. And when you listen to the end of the podcast, I actually wanted the music to continue long enough because I thought, you got to hear this. Like, it's so good, right? So a little shout out to my daughter, Sherry, and her contribution to the podcast. I love the music. So let's shift gears a little. What is the most unexpected or unusual experience you've ever had in your career as a musician or educator?
Oh my gosh, there's so many goofy things that happen. I mean, I don't know if I can list. I guess I can throw out. This just popped in my head right now. It may not be so helpful, but as from a music education point of view, but we had this wedding my jazz quintet played, and the agent called and it set it up, and you could kind of tell that there was going to be a certain amount of pickiness, that it wasn't going to be an easy one, because where they send you 75 tunes, we'd like you to play these, and 5 hours, and musicians are not going to be fed. And it had a few red flags. And so about 2 weeks before the gig was to come around, the agent called and said, "No, the wedding's off. We're still paying you the deposit." And I said, "What happened?" "Oh, the groom got cold feet." "Oh, okay. Well, I guess I'll look for another booking on that date. Thanks for letting me know." 5 days before what was to be the wedding day, agent calls back. "Are you still available? Still available? Oh, did you find another booking for us?" "No, the wedding's back on." I said, "Oh, so they made up?" And he said, "No, they found a new groom." So I don't know the backstory of that, but that was one of those shocking moments. Perhaps the new groom was the reason the wedding was gone off. But yeah, those things happen in the music world, right?
Oh my
There's so
gosh.
many stories. Yeah.
I think you're right. I think as musicians, and especially when you do gigs and you travel, the world, I think we could all write a million books, funny stories that happen in our industry. And oh my goodness. So finally, Bradley, for all of our aspiring musicians and educators listening, what's one piece of advice you'd like to share about pursuing a career in music and finding your own unique voice?
Okay, so this is double-sided, and because these two words contradict each other, but have a flexible plan. If I made one mistake, it was being too focused. I really wanted to be a full-time jazz performer. Once I realized that there wasn't going to be a lot of demand for orchestral pieces by Bradley Sowash, I thought, well, I'm going to make my living on the stage and in the sessions and so on. And I definitely got a piece of that. Along the way, I didn't see what was right in front of my nose, which is the educational piece. And I sometimes talk to college students or university music school students that are performance majors. How many of them think that they will ever teach? And hardly anybody raises their hand. They're all going to be the next superstar at that age.
Yeah.
When, in fact, Mozart was a teacher, Beethoven was a teacher. It's part of the package that enables a musician to put together a career. So once I began to open up to other opportunities and realized that it was okay to be, I thought it was just work harder. Like, I had good grades as a young boy. If you just work hard, you get the reward. And it's just about wore myself out, literally trying so hard to take all my money just from playing. And then when that loosened up, I was doing teaching, I was publishing. It was, getting into other instruments, allowing myself to take cheesy gigs alongside high-profile gigs. I can't even think of them all right now. The musical royalty licensing fees that come in, writing a lot of church music was an area I never thought I would get involved with. Now I have loads of jazz-influenced church arrangements. And just because I started to get a few calls from churches, and okay, well, let me try that, and writing for that. And the point is, be open to the possibility that you can make a living as a musician in many ways, and then don't say no to anything. So I'm thinking of that one time we got a call, we're having a space party. Everybody's coming dressed as aliens and astronauts. Do you guys have repertory for that? Yeah, sure. No, but so quickly we're learning, the Cantina song and Star Trek, and just make it. Yeah, we could do that and make it happen. So don't say no unless you're really sure you're unqualified, because just get yourself qualified.
Yeah. Oh, that's such great advice. And I think too, when we diversify, and it's true, as musicians, I think we almost elevate our skill set as musicians when we teach, because they always say, if you truly want to learn, teach.
That's so true.
Yeah. And it's just been such a delight chatting with you, Bradley. You've made me dance. You've made me smile. You've made me laugh, and you've made me think. And, it brings us to an end of another intriguing episode of the Ultimate Music Teachers Productivity and Profitability Podcast. Again, want to say so much. Thank you, Bradley, for joining me today and all of our listeners. How can people learn more about you and all of your magical things in your creativity bag?
Well, like most musicians, the easy way to find me is just search it. And then my website is bradleysowash.com. If you're interested in following up on having some peaks at my farm, look for MSO, Moso Farms. I think that website changes now and then, so you may have to search that, but you might get some nice pictures of us in action if that interests you. Yeah, so bradleysowash.com, and I'm published by Chose Music, KJOS, and I don't know. I guess I would say, Gloria, that in a way that's secondary to me. I'm getting to this stage of life where what I'm interested in is impact and just keeping it going. And so I don't really focus in my own marketing and profitability on some strategy that will get me to the next level. I'm just more about being genuine, doing what I love, and that reads as my brand, and it works.
Yeah, 100%, Bradley. And thank you again so much. It's been an absolute pleasure having you on the show, and your insights and stories, are not just enlightening, but they're also a testament to the power of music in shaping lives. And to our listeners, we hope this conversation has struck a chord with you. Don't know which chord it is, but Bradley shared a lot of them today. So, yeah. Inspiring you to explore music. 100%, Bradley. It was a lot of fun. So remember, whether you're on the piano bench or you're on a tractor seat, there is a rhythm to life waiting to be played. So thanks for tuning in. Until next time, keep those musical minds make a difference in the world through music education. So I'm Gloria St. Germain signing off from the Ultimate Music Teachers Podcast. Don't forget to subscribe to our podcast. If you loved today's episode, please leave us a review, share it with your fellow music enthusiasts. Until next time, keep playing the music. Thanks for listening and have a musical day. Bye now. Thanks for listening to the Ultimate Music Teachers Productivity and Profitability Podcast. Together, we can transform lives through the power of music education. I invite you to explore what's possible for your musical journey inside our UMT community. Simply join our Ultimate Music Teachers private Facebook group, where we network, answer questions, host live events, and connect on a deeper level. Here's to your ultimate music teaching success with productivity and profitability. Till next time, teach with passion.